Good morning, ladies and gents. A quick discussion on sleeper cells and the threat to the UK, Europe, and quite frankly, anywhere. It's the 23rd of June, 2025. It's a bit cooler out there here in the UK, that is. So some people will be pleased with that. As normal, I'll be throwing up some slides and pictures, but this is going to be pictures of people. So it's just important that you see these pictures for the purpose of this video. My last video was a red alert about the Iranian state media's. They were claiming that there was going to be a life-changing surprise attack on Israel a few days back, which didn't actually happen on Wednesday night, as suggested. I won't be posting any more red alerts based on ifs, buts, and maybes. It, it's the only time that I've done it, but I won't be removing the video for two reasons. Hopefully, there's some useful content there. But even though nothing happened on that predicted night back on Wednesday, I'm still fairly confident that whatever that event is, or whatever it is that's planned, is still likely to happen. So I'm just going to leave that content out there just because it didn't happen last Wednesday. It doesn't mean it's not going to. But I think it's more likely now, following the US's involvement over the weekend and those nuclear facilities. I only ever put out a red alert. Oh, I've only actually put one out once. I've only ever done that once. So going forward from now, and because of the information being slightly incorrect, I'll only ever put out a red alert now in the event that something has already happened and is significant enough for you guys to be informed. This is not a news channel. It's a prepping channel, and I don't want to be sucked into that bullshit news space because it's exactly that. It's bullshit, and it's deflecting, it's distracting. And guys, we don't have time for that. Nor do I want to be sort of mugged off by this misinformation and lies, and then just passing that crap on to you. There are preppers out there in that space, and they're trying to get into that space. So there's well-established channels out there that they've kind of pretty much nailed it, but they're all talking about the same thing, which is fine. Each to their own, and no matter how that awareness is being delivered, is all. To be fair, it's all for a good cause. I go on to some of those channels. I run through the content. I get rid of all the shit, and then I retain anything that's useful and meaningful. For me. But anyway, enough of everybody else's sort of content. Let's just talk about you and your awareness first and foremost. And most of you are hopefully aware of this: that the US attacked Iran on Saturday night, hitting at least 3 of the primary nuclear targets. That's been discussed across numerous channels this week. I'm not going to provide you with any news on those attacks because let's face it, guys, it's all a bit of a guessing game at the moment. And we need to let the dust settle so that we can accurately assess the damage, which is going to be difficult because the damage has been caused underground. However, in summary, this is my verdict, and I'm just going to get this out the way quickly. I think it's only fair to do that. But this is my verdict, and then we'll move on to the sleeper cells. I'm hearing a lot now about how there was and wasn't significant damage. Let's face it, if a 15-ton bomb times 6 of them, so that's 90 tons of munitions, are hitting their target and exploding 1 to 200 feet underground, that is causing significant damage. So don't listen to anyone saying otherwise. But those bombs may have caused, let's say, damage to the infrastructure of the complex, but not the assets stored within it. Another verdict I want to comment on quickly is why the US made it public to announce or even suggest that the attack was going to be happening over this weekend. Supposedly, giving Iran the heads up before the attack, and therefore giving them the opportunity to move said assets to an alternative facility. It's now being suggested from satellite images that there were convoys of trucks. So they were all kind of lined up, sort of outside of these bunkers, ready to move enriched materials and equipment out of those bunkers. That's what we're led to believe. Everyone will now create yet more bullshit narratives, and they'll come up with all kinds of rubbish. Let me make this very clear, guys, because I don't think people understand this. Do you honestly, and be honest when be honest with yourselves when thinking about this. Do you honestly think that the militaries and the intelligence services around the world are fucking idiots? Is that honestly what people think out there? They honestly think, hey everyone, we're going to attack such sensitive targets, critical to this whole shit show, and just hope that they can achieve their goal regardless. And on top of that, let's just let the enemy know we're coming. No, should be the answer really to those questions. But again, I don't know. I don't know what people are thinking. I don't know what other channels and what other information they're sort of receiving and watching and listening to. So why then was it made public? Okay, guys, because I'm not having that anyway. I'm not having it. There are the military and the intelligence services and agencies and all that. They've been at this for years and years and years. They're using high tech equipment. The intel that's being collected is so confidential that you're just not going to come out with a comment like that unless there's a good reason for it. And again, guys, just a theory. But as you know, if you've seen any of my sort of previous videos, I work alongside logic and common sense. So to be able to come up with logical answers to other people's questions, we have to try and put ourselves into other people's shoes. So here goes. We have received intel that enriched uranium is buried 400 to 600 feet underground. And why? Because as an Iranian sort of intelligence commanding officer, shall we say, you're going to know point blank about the GBU 57s, the GBU 72s, and also the B61-13 nuclear gravity bombs. Because believe it or not, those bombs have been around for a while. They're going to know that they're effective to 200 feet. So what are you going to do with that information? Okay, guys, put yourself in the Iranians' sort of position, that into their shoes. You're going to make sure that the uranium is buried 400 to 600 feet below the ground, and the Americans know this. So now the ball is in the US's court, and again, they're working along the lines of common sense, and again, only my opinion. But this is what I'm going to do. The question I'm going to be asking is, do we really know how much uranium is in the bunker? And do we know to what level it's been sort of enriched? There is a possibility that they're going to be unsure because unless you've got people in those bunkers and working on that enrichment, you're not going to know. So we need to find the answer to that question before we go, bombing the fucking hell out of it. We need to bring the uranium to the surface, and what better way to do that is to announce publicly that we're going to bomb the hell out of that facility, knowing that the first thing the Iranians are going to do is move that Iranian out of the facility. And that's that's logic. So we're only seeing the lorries lined up outside of these facilities, waiting to enter the compound and just move that shit out of there. We're not seeing the ongoing ISR or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance afterwards. Intelligence would have to be monitoring those sites before, during, and after. They would have seen those transport trucks arrive. They would have let them go into the bunkers, load up, and come back out to the surface. But what they would have also sort of been doing is from that point onwards is track every single truck to its new location. And that's the ISR. We're all about talking about it's information, because if you're unsure, then you need to confirm that intel. You have to. The West will now know that yes, there was definitely enriched uranium on those trucks, and you know why? Because enriched uranium gives off it's a detectable signature through sort of radioactive emissions that can be detected from the air, and that is exactly what intel gathering is. Now, the US can better plan a second strike on an alternative bunkers wherever that stuff's been taken. and may not need, may not need to go so deep again, depending on which bunkers they've gone to. So what I'm trying to say is, let's announce that we're going to bomb the shit out of you, knowing full well if you've got half a bit of half a bit of common sense, you're going to move that uranium out of there. So you bring it to the surface, and then if there's 20 trucks outside, complex one, they would have detected whether there's uranium on any of those trucks. Which ones? Right. Okay. So where are they going? Where are they moving this stuff, guys? You know, there's stuff that I'm hearing about, on online at the moment, and people are just, I don't even know what they're thinking and what their theories are and stuff like that. Nobody seems to be, sort of using any level of common sense. Anyway, I'm not here to sort of criticize anybody. I'm just telling you this, the logic and the common sense. And that's just me. I don't work for the intelligence or government or anything like that. But let's just look at this logically, shall we? Anyway, move away from that. That's what I think happened. I think that was made public. Let's bring that assets or those assets to the surface, and then let's track where they're being moved to, and then let's plan a second strike. Okay, that's it. Right, sorry about that, guys. Let's just quickly move on to the real subject here, and that is sleeper cells. And the reason why you're here, I'm guessing you're going to hear about this a lot more, and I'll tell you for why. The war that's kicked off between Israel and Iran, I was going to say this week. It's well over a week now. Well, it's probably a week now. It's certainly escalated this week, and it's jumped to another level just over the last couple of days or the couple of nights, especially after the US bunker busters on those facilities. You need to forget about much of the mainstream news. By the time they broadcast, it's all old news, and we've sort of moved on from that. You should have moved on from that. When I say, listen, guys, I'd say keep an ear to the ground. Make sure that you're not distracted by all that crap. But the purpose of this is so you can prepare for what's coming. Okay, and so don't be distracted. Mainstream this morning will be talking about those attacks and yesterday, whereas me, I'm now trying to assess the retaliation scenarios we could sort of see happening over the next couple of days. So that's Iran's retaliation options in response to, the US attack. Whether that be the scattering of sea mines across the Strait of Hormuz, attacks on US air bases across the Middle East, attacks on naval vessels out at sea, within range, obviously, of Iranian ballistic missiles, and of course, the activation of sleeper cells around the world. So, don't let a lot of this sort of bluster distract you. We need to stay on point if you want to sort of successfully prepare for any of this. Iran attacked Israel through their Hamas proxy on the 7th of October. Yeah, 7th of October last year, which resulted in initially killing 1,200 Israelis and the killing and the slaughtering of 50,000 plus Palestinians in Gaza in retaliation, and still continues today. Iran are also responsible for funding and supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, and many more across the whole of the Middle East. I'm not going to call them terrorists because I've had enough of reading about how such organisations aren't terrorists, they're militants, or well, if Iran are terrorists, then so is Israel, or the Americans are the biggest terrorists in the world, or whatever. Listen, the list can go on. I'm not here to sort of argue who is and who isn't. All right, this stuff's just happening. Some of those statements may be right. Because let's face it, they're all as bad as each other, especially when we're talking about governments. However, it's more about the cause that should really concern people, which for many in the Middle East will be fighting over religion, and that's another subject I'm only just gonna touch on lightly because it's relevant to what we're talking about. The focus is directly on Iran now, and the regime and the supreme leader. Is it Ali Khamenei? Khamenei, that's it. Yeah, Ali Khamenei. He's now 86 years old. He's been in power since 1989. His influence across the country for the duration of his position is strong. It's still very strong. He transformed the Islamic Republic and he built the Parliamentary Revolutionary Guard into, I suppose, the dominant force in Iran's military, consisting of mostly actually, it's the elite military in Iran, and they also oversee the ballistic missile program for Iran, and they have pretty much, they've built Iran into a regional power. You will hear about the Islamic Republic system or the mullahs. So that'd be the Mulahs, I think it's spelled, or the Shiite Muslim clerics, who are said to be the unquestionable authority below only that of God, whose rule of law is fortunately, or unfortunately, is entrenched in Iran. And then there's the Axis of Resistance, a collection of pro-Iranian proxies stretching from Yemen to Lebanon, hence the Iranian influence on Hezbollah and the Houthis. So, guys, if any of you aren't sort of religious, and my guess is, some won't be, but just like me, I believe in a God, but I don't follow any religious sort of practices. So don't judge me or anyone else, for their religious sort of beliefs. I might pray to God and ask, why is he why has someone close to me been sort of taken away from me or unfairly passed away? Or I have prayed in the past for souls that have passed over following a massacre. For those of you out there that are married, you would have followed a ceremonial sort of rule of law, shall we say, to be wedded to your partner. However, what I don't do is I don't go to church and listen to someone talking, from a book full of stories based on events that happened 2,000 plus years ago. Or you won't find me praying 6 to 8 times a day, nor will you find me, I don't know, making offerings and chanting whilst engaging in rituals. But listen, guys, that shouldn't make me any better or any worse than anyone else out there. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because we're talking about a regime in Iran that is heavily influenced by religion. But just to put that into perspective, before we swiftly move on to sleeper cells, Christianity, 2.3 billion. Islam, 2 billion, Hinduism, 1.2 billion, and Buddhism is 500,000 people following such religion. So you can understand the influence and the power these movements create, guys. A week ago on Friday, so just over a week ago, the red flag of revenge was raised above the Jam Kamaran mosque in Qom. That's one of Iran's most sacred sites, and that was raised after the deadly sort of airstrikes on Iran by Israel, sort of at the beginning of last week. It's a symbolic flag which signals a call for justice and retaliation in Shia tradition. So, what does a call for justice and retaliation mean? Some are saying the activation of sleeper cells around the world, calling for them to start their predefined plans and executing said plans. I take it in revenge and retaliation for, at the moment, the Israeli strikes. That could now be the the involvement of the US as well. Guys, after this weekend, retaliation could come in sort of many different forms. When I say this weekend, after the US kind of got involved, whether that be the shutting of shipping lanes in and out of the Middle East or terrorist attacks across Europe, it doesn't matter. We all just need to be super vigilant now. So, what is and does a sleeper cell sort of look like? I just want to, you're going to hear about this, guys. It's going to be in the papers. It's going to be on the news, and it is, believe me, it's a threat. It's a massive threat. So people need to be taking notes. Let me just give you a breakdown of what that actually means. A sleeper cell is a clandestine group of operatives. They're often terrorists, Don't like to use that word, but I'm using it, who live among a target population and concealing their true identities and intentions until activated by a leader or command, for a specific mission, whatever that might be. They operate in secrecy, obviously, maintaining a low profile and just blending into, sort of the local communities and society in general. Um, Often for extended periods before being called up to act on whatever that mission might be. So when we say being called up on, to act, that calling could be the rising of this flag in Iran and the opening up of all sorts of communication sort of methods and links now. The basic components, I'm just going to go through this quickly. There's no point in bringing out a video and talking about sleeper cells if no one knows what they are. Um, the basic components of a sleeper cell, they're normally small. They're compartmentalized units. Sleeper cells typically consist of a small number of individuals, each with limited knowledge of the larger organization or other cells. So this compartmentalization is a security measure to limit the damage if, let's say, one cell's is compromised. You've got secrecy and cover. So this is going to be its members maintaining normal lives, often hidden away and holding jobs. Excuse me, holding jobs and building relationships within the community, making them, difficult to identify as potential threats. You've got limited communication, which is going to be between the cells and the sort of larger or the higher command, which is often tightly controlled and infrequent. So typically through pre-arranged methods and signals. So, limited communication until something has to be done. You've got the activation by leadership, which is going to be sleeper cells being activated by the leader or command when the time is right for their specific mission, whatever that mission might be. The activation may be triggered by a specific event, a coded message, or a predetermined timeline. And that is where this flag comes into play, as in, there's a global signal right there. Potential for long-term operation. So that's one of the key problems we have. So sleeper cells can remain dormant for years, waiting for the opportune moment to strike, making them a persistent and potentially dangerous threat. And the reason for this is because they've blended into your surroundings and mine. You have accepted them as friends, possibly. So what they do next, you're never going to expect nor see come in. So the prize of attack is surprise. So for any of you ex or serving forces out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. Infrastructure. Cells need a variety of technical and administrative functions, such as recruitment and training. So, guys, this is an operation. This is an infrastructure. This is not just a group of people that have just decided to, Anyway, there's a lot. There's a lot of organisation in this, and there's a lot of patience. So you're going to be talking about, some of this. Some of this infrastructure is going to consist of recruitment and training, forged documents, counterfeit currencies. You've got finance and fundraising because they need to fund whatever their mission is. Those people live in and so forth. Communications. So there's going to be people responsible for communications. There's also transportation and logistics, again, depending on the nature of the attack and what equipment is needed. There's going to be a requirement for safe houses. So pre-attack and afterwards as well. So, to move in, a sleeper cell or agent or whatever you want to call them into place before the attack, and then also to a safe house thereafter. Reconnaissance and counter surveillance, guys, they don't just wake up in the morning and go, right, that's it, we're going to go off and do that. They're going to make sure they understand the target first. Operational planning, well, that comes into play with your ISR, your reconnaissance, counter surveillance, whatever it is. An operational plan has to be actioned, or not actioned, put into place before it's actioned. Arms and ammunition, again, depending on the nature of the sleeper cell. Not all sleeper cells are going to be out there wanting to kill people. Well, they might want to, but that might not be their mission. And some examples of how some sleeper cells might operate. So, again, we've got, let's say, the terrorist organizations, which are going to be sleeper cells that can be used to embed operatives into a said country or region, allowing for coordinated attacks or acts of sabotage when activated. We've then got espionage. Um, we've got espionage, which will be spies, maybe sort of placed into a target country or organization to gather intelligence or prepare for future operations. You've then got organized crime. So sleeper cells may use criminal organizations to establish a presence in a new area or to just carry out specific illegal activities. Again, there's lots of gains in being amongst criminals. I'm going to now focus on the UK. But listen, guys, if you're living outside of the UK, these same principles still apply to you. As I've said, you and I are going to start hearing a lot about these sleeper cells, and the time to start worrying about this would have been when that red flag of revenge was raised last Friday. Probably before that, to be honest with you. But listen, that's a sign. Okay, that's a sign, and it's public. It's out there. It's pretty much saying we're coming for you. Yeah. So you either take that with a pinch of salt, or you take it seriously. But even more of a sign would be, let's say, for instance, for the shit hitting the fan, is if the supreme leader of Iran was killed or assassinated, which I'm guessing is probably on the cards. If that happens, guys, and you spend time traveling around the country, working in major cities in the UK, or working near critical infrastructure sites, or even living in close proximity of military personnel and or government representatives. So they could be your neighbours, friends, work colleagues, or whatever it is, as well as a host of other scenarios. Then, without a doubt, guys, you're going to need to switch on and be super vigilant. Right, I'm going to throw up some pictures, and I'm just going to talk my way through this. Okay. A quick disclaimer though, the pictures I'm about to show you and the questions I'm about to ask you are all along the lines of fiction and not facts. I do not know any of the people in these pictures. I have never met any of these people, and I'm merely just using these pictures to create it's a comparative scenario. Let's put it like that, along the lines of examples. Okay, I just want to put that out there. I don't want people, getting the wrong idea here. Right, guys, we don't know if a person stood next to us on a platform whilst waiting for a train is going to detonate a suicide or other sort of pre-planted bomb on the underground or overground. It's been done before and it wasn't too long ago, so there's nothing new here. I have no idea whether or not the people I'm getting on a bus with are armed with machetes and or firearms and are about to cause mass murder in Oxford Circus on Oxford Street. Um, my older kids won't know whether or not they have strong relationships now with mates at school, college, or university whose parents are members of a sleeper cell, and or teaching staff in such establishments are also part of some kind of cell. I don't know if there is a teacher within a school collecting information on parents who, I don't know, would also be sort of personnel working for government, the military, or even parents who are working for utility providers, sort of covering critical infrastructure and stuff like that, with an intent to, or well, with an intent to, let's say, assassinate them. So, guys, these are just all possibilities. Okay, we can't talk about this without putting some scenarios out there. So I'm just hoping that some of you understand this, because you need to think carefully about this. We we don't know whether or not there are people working in local government infiltrating the infrastructures of local They're utility providers. When I say local utilities, I'm talking about water, gas, electricity, and other services in your area. So granting them planning permission, so that you could have local councillors granting sort of planning permission for projects and being invited to have tours around said facilities and collecting intelligence along with other sort of sleeper cell members actually working for those utility providers. We don't know if there's a member of staff there embedding themselves sort of into, I don't know, supermarket chains, monitoring and tracking the movement of food around the country. And when I go to the doctors, or you and I go to the doctors, or even hospital, I'm never going to be expecting those doctors or nurses who treat me to now be planning to inject people with a poison, or they're simply just collecting loads of personal data on people from their NHS records. No one is ever going to expect somebody in law enforcement, or worse still, in the British Armed Forces, to have any ties to anyone in a sleeper cell. But this is possible because we're only hearing over the weekend just gone about the British man in Cyprus at RAF, was it Akrotiri, spying for the Iranians. Neither you, neither you nor I, or me and my partner are going to know whether the next door neighbour we have known and been speaking to for the last 10 years is a commanding officer for a regional sleeper cell. And finally, I am, you know, am I really going to know whether or not my son is sat on his laptop in his bedroom being radicalized by external influences? And because let's face it, if all of that, that shit on TikTok and Insta can influence these kids, then anything's possible. So I'm hoping none of them sort of, none of those people in those pictures are sort of sleeper cell members. But the reality is, guys, we're never really going to know. Unfortunately, most will firstly judge a book by its cover. And from that analysis, they've already made a judgment call. In reality, though, the intelligence services and agencies are sort of taught to look straight through the person, look past the ethnicity, the way they dress, and so on. And instead of kind of, they're never going to be judged. They're never going to be taught, sorry, to judge a book by its cover. However, there are external, factors to consider. But what I'm trying to say is that they are being taught instead to focus more on the target's behaviour, body language, locations, social gatherings, employment, and so forth. And a world of other pointers, in sort of piecing together target profiles. You and I, depending on where in the country we live, work and socializing, will need to be hyper vigilant and just adopting some of these skills in doing your bit for national sort of security and just keeping yourselves and those around you safe. So there's also something else to consider here, guys, when we're talking about sleeper cells already embedded into the UK society. This could be individuals, families, work colleagues, friends, neighbours, and believe it or not, even your family members. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, really, I know these people, I've known them for years and all the rest of it. You need to understand the concept of a sleeper cell first before you can categorically say, yes, that person is, and no, that person isn't. Okay. But we also have to consider this, that we have to be talking about those other individuals that aren't a member of sort of sleeper cells, those brainwashed or radicalized, those that simply just want to join the party with very strong views and make those views known. We're not just talking about sleeper cells embedded among us, but those fanatics that are kind of new to the game or not, haven't necessarily embedded themselves anywhere, but are happy to just run around stabbing people, shooting people, blowing themselves up and innocent people in public, and all those kind of mad sort of anyway, those mad things. Unfortunately, for the intelligence service, they simply cannot work on the grounds or those sort of grounds, and instead sort of act on intelligence already sort of received and collected through, I'm not going to use spies. Don't even like using that word, but surveillance and open source such as social media. An individual becomes a suspect when there is credible evidence or information suggesting they've been involved or they are involved in certain activities. This could include evidence of espionage, terrorism, or other sort of serious offences. Remember, guys, MI5, MI6, NCA, military government services, and any other associated agencies have the resources, they have the manpower, time, and money to do this job. But it's literally impossible for them to cover all bases. And unfortunately, some of these are going to get through the net. It will be down to you and I to do our bit for national security in seeing anything suspicious and just passing that information on. I've completely gone into hypervigilant mode, so much so that everyone's a fucking suspect at the moment for me, until I know otherwise. We had a local fete going off this weekend, which is once a year. So all the locals and the people from sort of further afield, they make the effort, they turn up and they support the entertainment and, small businesses that are there. However, and before I say this last piece, here's another quick disclaimer. I have mentioned in one of my very first videos, which would have been some sort of 8 months ago. It might have even been the channel introduction video, which is the very first video that I done, where I mentioned something about me being interested in people. What when I say that, what are people about? Where do they come from? What are they doing? What are they into? What do they like? What they don't like, and all the rest of it. Some might call it being nosy, but it's not that. But I used to, let's say, I don't know, go into a town or a city shopping, and I'd find myself sort of sat outside a shop or in a high street somewhere, and I would be people watching. And whilst I was doing that, I would be sort of just trying to work out what type of people they were, and natural instinct would kick in first. That being sight, seeing a visual representation of that person, and ultimately judging that person by what I saw. Because of course, unless you know them, then you don't. Over the years, I've stopped the judging of a book cover, and I now sort of focus on things like behaviors and body language. So, like I say, looking past the person at face value. Just because somebody has stood there in front of you with a dark complexion, a beard, a bulging jacket, and a small, pack on their back, stood on a platform of the London Tube, doesn't mean or doesn't make them a threat. However, people are very quick to make a judgment based on based on what they see, and that can be fatal. If you have eyes on this guy and a Caucasian walks past, with his shorts and flip-flops on, with a small man bag over his shoulder and some headphones over the top of his head, and detonates a small device, killing 3 people and injuring 11 others, then we have a problem. You have to look past that, guys, and look at the person. Not look at the person at face value, but you need to be looking at what that person's doing, what they're looking at, their behaviour, what's their body language telling you. Do they look suspicious? And the list goes on from there. However, what I'm about to say is another disclaimer, and I'm just finishing off now. This is it, guys. But we had that local fete running, or the the locals were at this fete. There would have been a couple of thousand people there at least throughout the day, families and kids sort of walking around enjoying themselves throughout the day. But 200 meters away, there is a hotel with around 300 illegal immigrants in. These are people that are attempting to reside in the UK, which isn't an issue. And there are people that have come from war-stricken countries, persecution, and the list goes on with, the reasons why they're here or trying to, sort of stay here. Part of a sleeper cell or just terrorist cells makeup will be to infiltrate the target country by means of immigration routes. That's why I believe America will implode. They're not likely to get too much in the way of an external force attacking them. I think it's going to happen within. 9.7 million immigrants went across the southern border there over a 4-year period when Biden was president. And a lot of those were Chinese and from all over the world. And guys, that they were getting on planes, filling out visas, and it was just a one-way ticket, guys, because there was an intent there to get into South America, cross that border, throw your passport in the bushes, walk up to border control, and that's it. Start the process. But what is the intent? Yeah, because listen, immigration's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, guys, since slavery days, and even before that, the Egyptians, and further back than that. It's always, listen, humans are a commodity, and yeah, they're an asset. So that's all I'm going to say. Um, I've given my sort of views on immigration, and what I think is happening here in the UK. I can't speak for America, but I can kind of give an opinion as an outsider on what's kind of happening. Only opinions, so it means nothing. But we had that local fate. And again, 200 meters away, there's a hotel with at least 300 immigrants in. Now, if you are a sleeper cell, or you're an organizer of a sleeper cell, or you're just even a terrorist cell, you're going to infiltrate the target country or wherever it is using immigration routes. That's fact. Okay, that is fact. It's not me making it up or anything. That is fact. It's a way to embed oneself into the system. And if that's an easy route, which it seems to be an easy route, then that's the way it is. But anyway, whilst I was walking my dogs yesterday morning near this fate that was being set up, I kind of all of a sudden got this. It wasn't overwhelming, but the feeling of a threat. Um, if you wanted to, or was instructed to sort of seek revenge and retribution, one or more people could easily get away with doing that. But guys, what I'm trying to say here is when vigilant, you will find yourself assessing situations, surroundings, and locations. You will find yourself looking people up and down, judging a book by its cover. And there could be all sorts of thoughts going through your head at that time. This is a reality check, guys. For me, I trust no one until I know otherwise. This doesn't mean that I'm not going to talk to anyone, or not going to use public transport, or not be in crowded areas, or and be around hundreds of people. I don't know. Because remember, guys, the reality could be even worse than that, and you could find you could find that there is an attack that's just taken place, and the attackers are work colleagues of yours, or they have kids that play football with yours, or they're simply your next door neighbours. We just need to accept the fact that attacks on UK soil in the form of terrorism is now a very real and high threat, which can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I do not judge a book by its cover anymore, because up until a few years ago, I did. And to be honest, most of you have done so. It's dangerous to judge a book by its cover solely to determine a threat. You have to factor in other skills and senses, and not be distracted by portrayals online and social media. So as long as you stay switched on, vigilant and observant, guys, and on point when you leave your house, this has to make you feel better and in a better position. That's it, guys. It probably wasn't as short as I was expecting it to be, but it was a discussion on sleeper cells. It's just an awareness overview, shall we say. Just be ready for it, guys, just in case it happens anywhere near you and on your watch.